Look closely at the modern economic engine. Banking conglomerates and tech monopolies now command national wealth, rivaling the total output of entire states. This crushing economic reality was deliberately engineered. It is a system built on what we can call bad code. In the late 19th century, a small syndicate of industrial elites realized that true competition and democratic oversight were threats to their capital. They set out to rewrite the American operating system to shield themselves from those risks. Between 1886 and 1913, these men executed 3 massive structural exploits. They launched a coordinated legal, logistical, and financial campaign to build a containment matrix designed to protect their assets from public interference. To understand why the average citizen struggles to maintain momentum in today's economy, we must look past the surface-level symptoms. We must perform a forensic autopsy on the original source code they wrote over a century ago. In the late 1800s, the railroad monopolies faced a severe vulnerability. Because they were creatures of the state, they were entirely subject to local laws, taxes, and democratic regulation. To maintain their margins, they needed to find a way to elevate themselves above state authority. In 1886, the Southern Pacific Railroad brought a case called Santa Clara to the Supreme Court. It was a technical dispute over how California counties assessed the value of fences along the tracks. The railroad's lawyers argued that under the 14th Amendment, their corporation should be recognized as a person with constitutional rights. However, the Chief Justice explicitly refused to rule on that question, deciding the case strictly on the narrow issue of the fence assessments. The hack happened after the decision was made. The official court reporter, a former railroad executive named J.C. Bancroft Davis, quietly inserted a non-binding headnote at the top of the case summary. He claimed the court did recognize corporations as persons, even though the actual ruling said the opposite. This diagram shows how the clerical headnote bypassed the official court decision. Within 2 years, other judges began citing this rogue summary as if it were the law. They laundered a clerical error into binding legal precedent simply by repeating it as truth. This effectively stripped the 14th Amendment from its original purpose. An amendment designed to protect the rights of emancipated slaves was uncoupled from human beings and bolted onto artificial corporate structures to shield their capital. The bedrock of modern corporate supremacy, corporate personhood, does not come from a democratic vote. It grew from a fabricated clerical error, codified by those with the power to write the record. Securing legal rights was only the first phase. To dominate the entire economy, these elites realized they had to control every logistical input, from the iron ore in the ground to the transport lines that moved it. Giants like United States Steel achieved this through vertical integration. They owned the mines, the railroads, and the massive production facilities, allowing them to dictate costs across the entire supply chain. But 19th century state laws presented a problem. Most states strictly prohibited a corporation from owning property or stock across state lines, which prevented the formation of nationwide monopolies. Corporate lawyers bypassed this by inventing the trust and later the holding company. They lobbied New Jersey to legalize a corporate structure specifically designed to purchase and hold the shares of other corporations, regardless of their location. This structure acts as a legal umbrella. It allows a single central node to own and control disparate companies across the country. By moving management into this layer, monopolies could coordinate nationwide industrial output while remaining invisible to local state regulators. This structural exploit decoupled power from geographic accountability. It created an immortal layer of management that could operate across borders without ever being subject to the democracy of the people living within them. In 1907, a massive bank run nearly collapsed the American financial system, forcing J.P. Morgan to personally organize a private bailout. This exposed a critical vulnerability. Even the most powerful monopolies were one TANC away from extinction. They needed a mechanism to backstop their private risks with public resources. In November 1910, the wealthiest rival banking factions in the world initiated a secret expedition to the Jekyll Island Club. Using fake names and a sealed railcar to avoid detection, they spent 9 days drafting a plan to cartelize the American banking industry. This syndicate, representing the Morgan and Rockefeller interests, drafted the Aldrich Plan. It was designed to pool bank reserves and create a central authority that would protect large New York banks from future panics while suppressing their regional competitors. Knowing the public despised Wall Street, they rebranded the plan. They wrapped the Wall Street-authored document in the language of progressive reform and passed it through a Democratic administration as the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. By controlling the supply of new currency, the cartel gained the power of seigniorage. They could now expand credit for their own interests, while the American public paid the cost through a devalued dollar. This final exploit ensured that when the banks took massive risks and failed, the inflationary cost would be borne by the labor and savings of the entire population. By 1913, the machine was complete. They possessed the legal rights of humans, structural immunity to state laws, and a central bank to backstop risks. The wealth extraction we see today is a feature of that code. It performs exactly as the original architects intended, designed to protect the momentum of capital regardless of the cost to the individual. This architecture maintains its power by hiding its origins. Because the system was built through clerical errors and secret meetings, we only see the final, rigid results. We treat it as an unchangeable force of nature because the bad code was written out of sight. Reviewing the historical receipts destroys the idea that this system is inevitable. The equivalence between a living citizen and a multinational corporation was not a grand democratic choice. It was a localized administrative fiction. The operating system that dictates our reality was coded by men operating in the dark, and what was coded can be overwritten in the light.
All right, welcome back. Last time we talked about...
No. No. It's my turn. If you've ever felt like the American system is a prison, you aren't crazy. But you're probably looking for the warden in the wrong place. Most people look at the world today, they blame politicians, they blame the left, the president, they blame the right. They get caught up in the daily outrage cycle on whatever, Substack, Twitter, fighting over whatever. It's the distraction. The algorithms feed them to you. But what if I told you the system that is currently bleeding us dry hasn't changed its core operating system in over 100 years? We're going to talk about Democrats or Republicans somewhere else, not here. Here, we are doing an autopsy. Part 1 of the series, we covered 1773 to 1791. We talked about Alexander Hamilton, how he built, he was an instrumental part, even if he didn't build it himself. His friends kind of took advantage around the things he built to make it happen, but it was an extraction engine in the end. It was a perfect mathematical machine designed to transfer wealth from the working class to the elite. But in the 1800s, that machine had a fatal flaw. It was operated by human beings. And humans are a massive liability. Humans have egos, humans panic, and most importantly, if a human steals millions of dollars from a taxpayer, you could theoretically put that human in a jail cell. The architects of this prison realized that if they wanted to permanently enslave the public, they had to shed their human skin. Not lizards. They had to take the face off the machine so that the public would have no one left to punch. Over the 80-year period, from the 1830s to the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, the elite completely outsourced their theft to immortal, unarrestable legal fictions, like how that video concluded. They invented the corporate shell. They became a ghost in the machine. And today I am going to show you exactly how they did that and prove the historical receipts. Well, provide the historical to prove it. Here's slide 1. Most people look at the financial system and see a series of random crashes, bad luck, and greedy politicians. And that's because they are looking at the symptoms. But today we are going to be looking at the architecture. We are going to track the evolution of a parasite. In the early 1800s, a financial extraction machine had a fatal flaw. It relied on human beings. And humans are vulnerable. They have egos and they make mistakes. And worst of all, you can put a human being in jail. If the elite wanted to permanently extract wealth from the working class, they had to remove the human face from the machine. Oh yes, I shared this one. It's the oxygen gambit. Nicholas Biddle. I had never heard of this guy before I did this research. But he did something crazy, okay? In 1832, President Andrew Jackson threatened this guy's bank. So Biddle did what most people with bruised egos do. He threw a tantrum and he deliberately crashed the American economy. One person starving thousands of businesses of capital just to force Congress to submit. He proved the point exactly. A human operator is a liability. "30 years later, the Civil War breaks out. And to the politicians, it was a tragedy. But it's really the blood arbitrage loop. I will post these somewhere after for anyone who wants to see them more closely. And to Wall Street, it was the greatest risk-free procurement event in history. 600,000 Americans bled in the mud, Civil War. Banking elites lobbied for the exception clause in the Legal Tender Act. They legally forced the government to pay soldiers in worthless paper called greenbacks, while the bankers were paid 6% interest on war bonds in physical gold. The abstraction of human suffering was perfect. But stealing subsidies during a war is messy. They needed camouflage. Enter credit mobilier. Sounds fancy. The directors of the Transcontinental Railroad created a shadow company and basically hired themselves to build the railroad at a 100% markup. They charged taxpayers $94 million for what really cost $50 million to build. And what happens when a human does this? It's called embezzlement. But what happens when a corporation does it? Just business. Go with the clerical error. This one's nuts. When Congress started asking where the $44 million went, the architects did not pay. They simply handed out highly discounted VIP shares for the company to the vice president and key senators right before declaring massive dividends. And the investigation evaporated. This is the moment the elite successfully replaced the vulnerable human operator with an unarrestable legal fiction. And by 1910, the corporate shell was working so perfectly, but it needed a central operating system, an automated bailout machine. So 6 men travel in sea to Jekyll Island. Like, you can't make this. It's like, it sounds like a movie. It's in Georgia. They write the legislation for a private central banking cartel. Slap the word federal on the cover to trick the public and ram it through Congress right before Christmas 1913. And the cell door permanently closed. The government surrendered its power to print its own money and is now forced to borrow its own currency from a private cartel and stick the taxpayers with the bill for the interest. The ghost is completely inside the machine. The bad news is the cage is locked. The good news is we just found the blueprints. So this is the presentation for the second article in the series for 1773 to now. I highly advise you read the preface as well. We've had 3 articles out on this so far. Hit the like button, share it if you haven't already. I've prepared some more video, another one to explain it more directly. Let's see.
All right, welcome back. Last time we talked about the idea of a hidden architecture of power. Well, today we're shifting from the blueprint to the crime scene. We're going full forensic investigator to see how this system was actually deliberately built. Let's dive in. This sentence right here, this is our starting point. You might read it as an ending, but for us, it's a mystery. What exactly is this machine? How did it get turned on? And, who flipped the switch? That's what we're here to figure out. And that's really the core idea for our whole investigation. The huge, sprawling systems of corporate and financial power we live with today, they didn't just pop up out of nowhere. They were constructed, consciously, piece by piece. We're going to follow 3 major clues that show us exactly how it was done. Okay, our first clue, this one takes us way back to the Gilded Age, to what was basically a magic trick of legal interpretation. We're going to see how a constitutional amendment, created to protect people, was quietly rewired to serve a totally different master. I mean, just look at the contrast on this slide. It's jarring. On the left, you have the original noble purpose of the 14th Amendment to guarantee rights and freedom for newly emancipated slaves, a landmark of human rights. But then look to the right, look what it became in the hands of the railroad barons. Suddenly, it's a legal shield giving corporations the rights of a person so they could fight off government regulations. So the question is, how on earth did that happen? The numbers really tell the story here, don't they? Think about this. During the exact same time that Jim Crow laws were actively taking away the rights of African Americans, the Supreme Court was, it was busy with a different kind of person. Between 1890 and 1910, corporations brought 288 cases using the 14th Amendment. African Americans, just 19.
Nuts.
This wasn't some slow, accidental shift. This was a hostile takeover of a law, and these stats are the fingerprints left at the scene. So how is it done? Well, you can see it laid out here like a 4-step money laundering scheme for an idea. First, it starts with a flat-out lie. A big-shot railroad lawyer, Roscoe Conkling, just makes up a story that the amendment was always meant for corporations. Then comes the key move. A court reporter slips a little note into a case summary, not the ruling itself, just the summary.
So who here has grown up or lived their lives for a long time knowing or feeling like they've been told that corporations are people too? I know I have, and there is a legal precedent. But this is how. It's crazy.
Saying corporations are persons. And then a friendly justice cites that totally non-binding note as if it were settled law. He does it again a year later, and boom, the lie is now the law of the land. And this is the truly unbelievable part.
So
the entire legal foundation for corporate personhood, it didn't come from some brilliant legal argument or historic ruling.
Okay.
It came from a head note, which is basically just a post-it note for lawyers. As you can see from the definition, a head note has absolutely zero legal authority. It's not the law, it's not even part of the official court record, it's just a summary. And here it is. This is the smoking gun. A direct quote from a letter written by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at the time, Morrison Waite. He's writing about that exact case, and he says it plain as day. We avoided meeting the constitutional question.
So basically, they go. A corporation goes to court. They bring up the question of if a corporation is a person. The judges don't rule on it. They specifically say, we are not going to rule on this. Probably too complicated. They just didn't think. Well, actually, they did specify it just was not necessary for them to make a ruling of the overall judgment. So they just decided not to make a precedent for it. Fast forward. Somebody who has an interest in the company writes a head note, which is just something lawyers do, and it gets covered in the news. It's not the same as a judge making a ruling. And then later, and basically what the head note says is that, a corporation is a person, but he says it in his legalese. Anyway, that gives us a Supreme Court justice a reason to quote it later on as if it was a precedent and said that this is already a precedent. So, and more justices did it. So it was never actually ruled on. It's very strange.
The court deliberately dodged the question of whether a corporation was a person. But because of some clever paperwork by a court clerk, history now says the exact opposite happened. Okay, so the legal software of the machine has been rewritten. Now our investigation turns to the physical hardware. Because while all this was happening in the courtroom, out in the real world, the industrial titans were forging monopolies of steel and oil. You have to see these two things as happening together. This legal coup wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was the air cover for a massive physical consolidation of power. Guys like Rockefeller and Morgan, the so-called robber barons, were building these gigantic empires that controlled every single step of an industry. And they needed this new legal personhood to protect their creations from being regulated by the states. And nobody was better at this physical takeover than John D. Rockefeller. Just look at the speed. In about a dozen years, Standard Oil goes from being just one fish in a huge pond to owning 90% of the entire U.S. oil market. He used ruthless tactics, secret railroad deals, and this revolutionary legal tool called the trust, which let him control dozens of separate companies as if they were one giant monster. You know, it's hard to even wrap your head around this kind of wealth. In 1913, Rockefeller's personal fortune was equal to 2.3% of the entire American economy. Let me put that in today's terms.
That's too
If
much.
one person had that same share of the economy right now, they'd be worth over $500 billion. This wasn't just being rich, this was being an economic force of nature. But even Rockefeller's personal wealth kind of pales in comparison to the structural power that JP Morgan had. See, Morgan's genius wasn't about owning everything. It was about controlling everything. Through this web of interlocking directors on different company boards, his financial network basically had its hands on corporations with assets totaling more than half of the entire U.S. GDP.
Jesus.
That's the difference between owning a factory and owning the bank that owns all the factories. So we've got the legal code, we've got the physical hardware, but every machine needs a power source, right? Our third and final clue shows us how the most powerful bankers on the planet met in secret to create a kind of perpetual motion machine for money, an engine to fuel their ambitions forever.
The Federal Reserve.
You know what they
baby.
say, never let a good crisis go to waste. For the guys who built our modern financial system, their crisis was the panic of 1907. Banks were failing, people were panicking, and the whole economy was about to go off a cliff. It was only stopped when JP Morgan himself stepped in to organize a bailout. This chaos gave Wall Street the perfect opening to say, see, the system is too unstable. We need a permanent solution. We need a central bank. So who designed this solution? Well, in 1910, a small group of men snuck off to a private island in Georgia called Jekyll Island. And this wasn't some government commission of impartial experts. Just look at this list. This was a who's who of the Rockefeller, Morgan, and Rothschild financial empires. They met in complete secrecy to literally write the rules for a brand new American banking system, their system. Now, getting this plan passed was an absolute masterclass in political maneuvering. Their first attempt, called the Aldrich Plan, was dead on arrival. Aldrich was just too connected to Wall Street. So what did they do? In a brilliant move, the Democrats took the very same plan, slapped a new name on it, made a few tiny tweaks, and sold it to the public as their idea for reform. The nameplate on the front changed, but the core engine they designed on Jekyll Island, it was exactly the same. And this is the bottom line. The Constitution is pretty clear. It gives Congress the power to create money. But the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 essentially handed that power over to a central bank that's owned by private banks. It gave them the authority to create currency literally out of thin air. This was the final, crucial component the machine.
Any information that says otherwise, let me know. But finding this out is crazy for me. Like, the name Federal Reserve is deliberately meant to trick us.
Needed. So now let's put it all together. We have our three clues: the legal fiction, the physical monopoly, and the infinite power source. All the evidence is on the table, and it's time to reach a verdict on how this machine was actually built. It really is a three-part system when you look at it. Step 1, you give corporations the legal rights of a person to protect them from the government. Step 2, you build those corporations into massive monopolies that dominate the physical world. And step 3, you create a privately controlled central bank that can print money to finance the whole operation and bail it out whenever it runs into trouble.
It's all in
Once
the
you lock
history
those
books.
3 pieces together, the ghost in the machine was fully operational. And you know, some people saw it happening in real time. The very day the Federal Reserve Act passed, Congressman Charles Lindbergh Sr., the father of the famous pilot, stood up in Congress and said this. It's a chillingly accurate prediction. He understood that a power big enough to create economic booms could also be used to create busts, on purpose. He saw the machine for exactly what it was. And that really brings us to today. We've looked at how this machine was put together, piece by piece, over 100 years ago. We've seen the code, we've seen the hardware, we've seen the power source. The history is pretty clear. But it leaves us with one final and I think unavoidable question. If we know this machine was built, who's at the controls right now?
My theory is that there's not a system where one person controls it. Obviously, I think it'd be crazy to say that. It's more like our apathy and the voters who have the power to actually make changes, right? Like our neglect or ignorance, whatever it is, our collective lack of doing anything about it is what enables it to keep happening. And usually but this is the cycle of power, because when the people threaten the power, that's when things get complicated, right? And we're living in this era where we become sedated so easily. We have such a tough day at work. We don't make a lot of money, but we come home and we have so many distractions that allow us to forget about it until the next time we go to work and get mad and get angry. The Wizard of Oz, an allegory of this? Not intentionally. Well, honestly, I wouldn't say it is an allegory, because the Wizard of Oz is honestly the opposite, I think. The machine is real in this case, whereas the machine was the illusion in the Wizard of Oz. Does that make sense? Yes, because the machine is what we allowed to happen. What this video was just explaining, I think. Oh, why is my camera all laggy? What's up with my camera? There we go. What the video is trying to say was that these things were legally passed. The only one that wasn't necessarily legally passed was the head note that declared people as corporations, and then the Supreme Court referenced it and created a legal precedent. And the Supreme Courts are like what they say is like the law of the land. So that one did not go through legislation, but all the other ones were hidden through lobbies or bribery and working with the political parties to pass it legally. Those are clips I made. There's no name for it, but I can upload it to my YouTube and make a name for it. But it's what we were watching is a presentation, a video presentation talking about the article that I released today. My YouTube channel is the same as Substack, Common Sense Rebel. Pretty sure anyway. Let me double check. Yep, Common Sense Rebel. I'll do that after. But yeah, so basically there's a lot of people out there. There's not one person like in Wizard of Oz controlling everything. There's a lot of people out there who are greedy and they just want to make more money. I don't think that's a secret anymore. You know that there's people out there who sometimes you're like, why could they possibly want more money? But they always do, okay? And they're very protective and they think about it a lot. And I'm not saying every rich person is like that, but when you're rich and you are like that, you use your power to control power. And this has been enabled to the point where there's been so much what I would call, what's the best word? Obfuscation. It's obfuscated by political rhetoric, okay? Like, for instance, I'll just use Trump because he's in power now, but Democrats use their own rhetorics to pass laws that help corporations too. But the big beautiful bill, right? Most of the things that help working people expire in that bill, whereas the things that help corporations do not expire. But the way that it's presented by the political party hides it, kind of like how in the clip it explains how the Democrats at the time in 1910 put a nice framing around the Federal Reserve to sell that. So they don't need to be all working together if they all just want to get rich. It's the one downside of capitalism, but I will tell you, I think we're not living under capitalism. The reason why socialism is such a bad word in America is because we're already living in a corporatized socialism where the socialism is taken from the working people and given to the corporations in subsidies. That's not a real capitalist economy. This is a socialized economy for corporations. And that's why they hate the word socialism so much, because they think you're going to figure out that's what the hell this is. Yes, I've wrote an entire article about Citizens United too. And the policy, if we want to do this all going through politics, right? How else are we going to make changes? I don't know where we're going to start, because we're focusing on social issues which are important, but while the corporations just cash in. Meanwhile, they've somehow convinced the conservatives, the Republicans, to worry about their own social issues too. They're so worried about their traditionalism that they've got us fighting horizontally while the vertical money just keeps trickling up. It's kind of crazy. Like, that's the whole reason why I study these things, is because this needless identity based politics, which I think the left started, but not for bad reason, but now it's been hijacked by both parties, by like corporatism. Does anybody have any questions? It is. It's corporatized socialism. It really is. Yeah, I'll answer any questions. I like trying to run all my research. There's 4 research documents, right? Where's my browser? I don't know. Boop, boop, boop. 1 second. I'm so bad at scenes. It's like, I don't know. Okay. Yeah, I have these research papers. There's 4 of them. Whoops. And I fed my article into this website called Notebook LM. It's owned by Google, but it still talks shit about corporations, so I'm using it. My camera's stuck again. Why did it do that? There we go. And this is what helped me make those videos. It makes a lot of cool things like infographics, but there's another cool feature. How did I get so smart? Everything that I teach you guys, I just learned within the last, like, this one is dense, right? There's a lot of material here. I don't even think I've fully processed it all, but I have learned it. There's a difference between learning and fully understanding. There's so much information here. Someone who is paying attention for the first time might have noticed something, an insinuation that I didn't realize from the information that I reported on, because this is all new to me. We're like, learning together. The only reason I can do this is because I have people who are, thank you very much, paid subscribers, allowing me to spend so much time to learn these things. And so I could teach you guys. Jen says, I love your cat. Fountain, I have one as well. Is your cat's name Fountain? Oh, it pees a lot? Yes, corporatized socialism. It's a shame, really. Because the more I learn about socialism, the only reason why it makes sense is because it feels like it's going the other way, like opposite. Oh, the companies always get bailed out. Oh, subsidies, but where's our subsidies? Oh, they want to take away social safety nets? It's so confusing. So yeah, socialism, the blanket word socialism is supposed to be helping the common population, the majority population. But the idea of socialism also just means a distribution of resources through legal means. Isn't it means of production, right? So the means of production seems to be always going to corporate heads instead of allowing people to profit from it. So it's very confusing. It feels like backwards. Yes, exactly. Transferring risk to the individual. That is not what capitalism requires. That's why I wouldn't even call what we live under capitalism, and why I wouldn't claim to be necessarily anti-capitalist, because I don't think the system we live in right now is capitalism. However, I do think capitalism allows for like incentives that are selfish very easily, and I don't like that. But I don't know any other better system. That's a different type of systems thinking. Yep, owning the means of production. But yeah, I feel like capitalism, we haven't been living in the correct capitalism. I think all the research on social democracies existing right now is good, meaning that it looks promising. It's still capitalism, though. Which is another reason why I think capitalism's fine, if it has the proper regulation. Yeah, that's that selfish incentives. I forget the name of the guy, but there was there's a famous guy who coined the capitalism mindset, where it's like the only thing that matters is make more money. Like, straight up, it don't matter. Nothing else matters. Just make more money.
Usually when we think of a machine, there's this expectation of something physical, right? You picture gears, steel, maybe a glowing circuit board.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because a machine typically has a physical footprint. It's tangible. You can
Milton
actually see the
Friedman, okay.
mechanism working.
Yeah, exactly. If a machine breaks down, you can physically point to the cracked gear and say, hey, there it is. But what if the most powerful machine ever built is completely invisible?
Well, that's the terrifying part,
That's
isn't it?
probably
It
what I'm
really
thinking
is.
about,
What if it's made
Jess.
entirely out of paper leathers, legal codes, and math? So welcome to the deep dive. Today is April 7, 2026, and if you are listening to this, you are someone who loves to learn, but you absolutely hate information overload.
Oh, definitely. Nobody has time for that.
Right. You are looking for that major aha moment about how the modern world actually works, but without having to read like 1,000 pages of legislative history.
And today's stack of sources is uniquely suited for exactly that. I mean, we have a collection of incredibly dense forensic historical reports and legal deep dives focused on the 19th and early 20th centuries.
Right. And the mission for this deep dive is to map the exact deliberate architecture of the modern corporate and financial state. We are not looking at a story of organic, accidental free markets here.
No, not at all.
This is a forensic autopsy of how immense wealth extraction was mathematically engineered over 80 years. Okay, let's unpack this.
So to understand why this matters to you, and specifically to understand that modern, heavy feeling of economic exhaustion that so many people experience today, you really have to look at the source code that was written over a century ago.
Because it wasn't an accident.
Exactly. The friction of the modern economy isn't an accident. It was designed. And to trace that design, well, we have to start at the moment the architects realized they had a fatal flaw in their system.
A fatal flaw.
Yeah, they realized that running a financial empire manually was just too dangerous. Because at the end of the day, human beings have egos.
So before you can build an automated invisible machine, you basically have to test the manual version and watch it break. When exactly are we talking about here?
We are starting in the year 1832 with a man named Nicholas Biddle. He was a child prodigy who eventually
man.
became the president of the Second Bank of the United States.
Okay.
And you have to understand the sheer scale of this institution. It was a massive hybrid public-private central bank. It held the federal government's deposits and effectively controlled the entire nation's money supply.
And Biddle was elected to run this, like a democratic process.
Oh, not at all. Biddle was entirely unelected. Yet he possessed almost unilateral authority over the American economy. He could expand or contract credit pretty much at will.
Wow. That's a lot of power for one guy.
It was. But his immense power collided with President Andrew Jackson. You see, Jackson viewed the bank as an unconstitutional monopoly. He thought it was just enriching an elite financial class at the expense of the public. So Jackson vetoed the bank's charter renewal.
Right. And I imagine a powerful, unelected financier didn't exactly take kindly to the president shutting down his operation.
He took it incredibly personally. I mean, instead of negotiating or stepping down gracefully, Bill retaliated. He decided to deliberately crash the United States economy just to force the government's hand.
Are you serious?
Whoa, did someone just break the fourth wall? Let's hear it.
Oh yeah, I forgot. This doesn't work. Crap. But yeah. So I highly recommend you guys read the series. If you go to constructamiracle.com, the Substack app sucks at organizing series, all right? I highly recommend you use your mobile browser to find it. The Ghost of the East India Company will be here. It's the first one. It gives you a preface of the series that we're going to cover. Goes into 5 parts. So we already did part 1 and 2. Part 1 is linked after the preface, but it's also can be found here. These 2 articles are also relevant, and this is Anthony's article, which is always relevant too. But the series is supposed to cover 1773 to now, in terms of how our system has allowed for, in a way that is not necessarily hidden, but is definitely obfuscated through history, where they focus on other things. You know, the same techniques that our news companies use, to, lying by omission, right? The history books will tell you everything that happened in these years except for these things, even though they're documented. And you just got to dig a little deeper. So that's the history that we're going to be uncovering, because I'm hoping by learning that people designed things to be difficult, we can understand that we have to take control. And we are falling right into their, and I'm not saying it's a plan. It's just the selfish incentives of others. We are falling into their hands. And I don't know how else to say they. When I say they, y'all better know it means the selfish elites. Every time I say they, it's not one person, it's not a group, it's they, the selfish elites. Like, I can't tell you how many times I say they do that, they, and people are like, who's they? You sound, or like, they'll tell me who they think they is. And I'm just like, no, they changes all the time. It's just selfish people. Epstein class. I guess so. I guess you're right. Yeah. You see the Epstein class trying to go for everything. Like the 40-hour work week. Oh my God, really? Russian oligarch, 12-hour workday, 6 days a week. Oh, yeah. No, thank you. This is coming for the USA. No, thank you. I don't want that. Thanks, Jessica. I want to work with people who know how to organize. Because organization is my weakest point. And if somebody could like literally help direct, not my creativity, but help direct my direction, like literally, like like where to put my resources, what to focus on, what needs to get done so we can organize things. That's what I'm weak at. I'm not very good at traditional politics, traditional organizing. I'm a media research major, which is why this came naturally. I'm a media research major who has used software his whole life. I used to love computer games when I was like even 4 years old. I've been using computers forever, which is why I became so fascinated with AI. And actually, that's a whole nother rabbit hole too. But I'm in the right place at the right time, and I still need help. That's my point. So it's going to take a big team. People would have been so distracted after the Civil War. I know. If you guys haven't read the Shadow Arc series, that goes into detail about how after 9/11 we were so distracted it allowed for the surveillance age we're living in right now. Yeah, Israel. So that, Jessica, you're totally right. I've been keeping up with that, but there's a lot of coverage on that. I don't need to saturate that market. I feel like people are realizing that already, but I'm worried that if we don't, because that's geopolitical, right? It takes away from the whole who's controlling everything. It lets us blame other countries instead of, you know what I mean? I know you don't think that, but that's why I just don't want to saturate those stories. I want to keep us focused on the fact that this is a bad code. Well, that and how it affects us all, and also maybe another angle would be showing how the history has allowed this to happen, right? But I think that's what this series does already, especially with the Shadow Arc too. I know what you mean. So yeah, I still need to research part 3. Is what I mean when I say I learned everything with you guys. I don't even remember what part 3 is going to be. World War I, war profiteering. Well, that'll be fun. I know a lot of people have conspiracies. World War I. And what I've figured out with people's conspiracies is that usually there is actually real historical anomalies that happen. They're just not exactly what the conspiracies are. It seems like the conspiracies are meant to distract from real financial extraction. So let's see what I figure out next time. What is the Shadow Arc? The Shadow Arc is a series. It's also, if you go to constructivemiracle.com on your web browser, because that's what organizes this way. You scroll past this current series, 1773 to now, in this next block here. This is the Shadow Arc, and you'll start with the biggest one. Shadow Arc is big. It basically covers way too much. Imagine, I use the metaphor as our political system and our economic system together. I call it through the lens of a computer system, okay? And this was the day 9/10, September 10th. I'm freezing up here. I'm not prepared to explain the Shadow Arc. Oh my god. I think it was like 2.3 trillion missing dollars they announced was missing, the Pentagon did. And then the next day, while they were auditing the missing money in the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, planes hit the spots where people were auditing it. So 2 birds with 1 stone all of a sudden, right? No more audit for missing money. And oh look, there's an excuse to put more money into the Pentagon the day after. And what I do is explain the ripple effects. I don't get caught up in conspiracy stuff. That's the most I talk about 9/11, really. But I talk about the things that happen after because of it. And it goes on for 9 articles. And each article links to the next one at the bottom. It destroyed a lot of the records of the missing money, and it also gave a rise to the Patriot Act. It allowed the Patriot Act, which allowed for a lot of secret shadow funds and offshore banking, lots of things that seem to have no purpose other than hiding information that otherwise would be able to be known by the public. Which is why it's like the surveillance age, because they're allowed to watch us, but we can't watch them. I was actually working on a web page for the Shadow Arc. Where is it? So I can explain it more easily, and I'll put it on my website. It's not done yet, but where is it? I'm so not organized. Let's see. There it is. Nope, that's not it. Oh, there it is. The emergency didn't end, it just changed shapes. We were sold a story about hijackers, but the real operation was happening inside the books. This is the structural architecture of the operating system that replaced the Republic. Create chaos, demand control, seize power, privatize the enforcers. Wedge 1 of the Pentagon was the only fully renovated section of the Pentagon. It possessed a steel superstructure, Kevlar, catch, mesh, and blast-resistant glazing. When the impact occurred, the blast windows did not fail, and the Kevlar prevented outward venting. The result was a contained furnace. If the Pentagon strike killed the auditors, the collapse of Building 7 killed the evidence that would have killed the evidence they would have needed. The building housed the densest cluster of federal enforcement on the East Coast. No plane hit it. No debris structurally compromised it, but it still burned completely. Investigators had to beg corporations to resubmit evidence. The destruction created a de facto amnesty event for financial crime. And you can also see the whole shadow arc on my website. It works just like Substack. My website does. So, just in case they ban me. It's exactly the same. It even reads the same on a mobile phone. Look. Whoops. Come on, let's make it a little better than that. Yeah. See, like a mobile phone. You can still read it the same way. Go back. Oops. Access directory. Oh, there's some bugs, I guess. That's funny. Shadow arc, there it is. Like that. Boom. I like the website. I need to put more on there. You can even leave comments and stuff. Whoever wants to be the first to leave a comment. You can find everything here. It's more organized than my Substack. Just sometimes there's a bug. Like, I don't know why this isn't working. Whoops. Yeah, and I got a page for part 1 to catch up quickly on part 1. Yeah. I like my website. I just don't think it's done yet. But yeah, I'm done with the presentation. I'll edit the video and then I will upload it for whoever missed it. Why isn't my animation working? There we go. These animations are so cool. All right, guys. Check out the website, verticalwar.com, and catch up on 1773 to now. And I'll always come back.